Within 30 seconds, I was shoved back in our vehicle, and luckily, about 1,000 yards away, there was a local trauma center, and I had the surreal experience of sitting there, feeling somewhat normal, but understanding something was not quite right, looking at my wife from a distance and hearing her say, "I believe my husband is having a stroke right now."
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. Thank you for listening. On this episode, a new start of sorts, I'd like to talk to you about my stroke of luck. It was January 6th of this year, around 9 o'clock in the morning. My colleague and CFO and wife, Melissa, were on our way to a restaurant for a team meeting with someone you know, Eric, the producer. We came in the restaurant, I sat down, and I said, I need to finish this proposal I'm working on. I opened my laptop and started finishing this proposal when I realized that I was struggling mentally to get this done. But this is rather routine, something I do often, and they're somewhat formulaic in nature. But I realized that cognitively I was struggling to make this happen, to get this across the finish line. And as I focused in a little bit more, I noticed that individual letters and words on the screen seemed to be bouncing around. If during your childhood you ever played the game Arkanoid, where the balls were bouncing around to like break these cells, it seemed kind of like that. But I chose to ignore what was ever happening to me mentally, and I shut the laptop. And then I began speaking as I wanted to tell Melissa and Eric that we should begin the meeting and we should just dive right in. But immediately as the words came out of my mouth, I realized that whatever I intended to say, it did not sound the same way as I thought I'd said it. Both Melissa and Eric's mouth dropped slightly, and then Eric kind of chuckled and he said, "What?" So I casually and confidently repeated what I had just said, and at that point, both of their jaws opened even more, and Eric said, "I'm fairly certain Bradley's having a stroke." Within 30 seconds, I was shoved back in our vehicle, and luckily, about 1,000 yards away, there was a local trauma center, and I had the surreal experience of sitting there, feeling somewhat normal, but understanding something was not quite right, looking at my wife from a distance and hearing her say, "I believe my husband is having a stroke right now." Over the next 2 hours, in and out of different medical examination rooms and multiple MRI machines, it was confirmed, in fact, I was having a stroke. And for 2 horrifying hours, whatever connection was happening mentally within my brain, and certainly coming out of my mouth, was not operating well. And then, just like that, after about 2 hours, it stopped. It went away. I opened my mouth and I spoke fluently in English. And while I felt odd, I felt okay. An ambulance was already on the way to take me to a larger hospital who specializes in stroke treatment. And we stayed a while longer, and they ended up releasing me later that day. They determined what I had was called a TIA, which is a trans ischemic attack, which is a stroke that is underway, but for whatever reason, by the grace of God, this essentially resolves itself before any damage is really done. After I was diagnosed with a TIA, but prior to being discharged, I had a rather frank conversation with the doctor. And he said, we're going to review some of the basics here, just about how you are living. We're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about diet. We're going to talk about exercise. And we're going to talk about sleep. Let's start with stress. Do you have any stress in your life? I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. It was over the holidays, so we had traveled quite a bit to see family and friends. Both of that involves a fair amount of stress. And I run my own business. We're growing. We're hiring people. Lots of great opportunities. Certain more than enough stress. He said, okay, fine. You got a lot of stress. Tell me about your diet. You look reasonably in shape. And I said, well, I am doing some intermittent fasting. So I'm not eating late into the night, and I'm generally just having a cup of coffee in the morning and skipping breakfast. And he looked at me and said, why? And I didn't have a good answer. So we moved on from diet. He goes, tell me about exercise. I'm like, well, I've never been exercising more. I get up around 4:30 in the morning. I'm at the gym by 5. I'm back home by 6. He said, again, seems like you're in shape. Why are you doing that? Because it seems like you're cutting off a certain amount of sleep, which is what we're going to talk about next. Is it possible you're not getting enough sleep? And I said, yes, it's possible. So he looked at me, rubbed his temples, and you could tell he was not impressed with what he was hearing. Then he said, okay, anything else I should be aware of? And I said, well, yeah, a buddy of mine had mentioned this thing that this guy does named Wim Hof, where for the 60 to 90 seconds at the end of every shower in the morning, you put the water on freezing cold to shock your system to really help you wake up. And he looked at me and goes, yeah, Wim Hof? Yeah, stop that. Don't do that anymore. So after reviewing the stress, the diet, the exercise, and the sleep, the look he gave me was, you, my friend, are an idiot, and you almost killed yourself. What he said was, Brad, you're 43. If you're doing all these things at the same time, what did you think was going to happen? And the truth is, I thought nothing could happen. I thought I was somewhat invincible, and if you asked my kids prior to that day when I would die, they would both answer the same: when I'm 116 years old. That's the age that I was convinced is when I would leave this earth. The doctor continued on. He said, hey, listen, when I tell people to take care of yourself, I mean that literally. You only have one vessel per soul. He says, you got that? One vessel per soul. That's your body. That's all you get. And this is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real thing. In the subsequent 4 months, I saw the neurologist, actually 2 of them, 7 times, and I did 1 sleep study. They found nothing. Yes, you can insert the joke here. I also saw the cardiologist 6 different times, and their ultimate diagnosis was this was a cryptogenic stroke, which means it's partly unknowable, or given the litany of things that I described when I talked about my stress, exercise, diet, and sleep, I said, yeah, it's kind of multiple potential causes, but we don't really know. What I did know is that I have a new perspective on life, because after my wife went through her breast cancer journey several years ago, where she went through chemo, she had a double mastectomy, she did radiation, and a couple other surgeries to boot, I started reciting a single line, among others, every single day. And it reads, I will live each day as if it is my last. I will live each day as if it is my last. I repeat that every single morning. And yet, after going through the experience I had with my wife, I realized I wasn't actually living that way. And I was forced to admit that I didn't feel like I was going to live till 116 anymore. The other thing I felt was shame. Now, shame is not a very helpful emotion, but as much as I didn't want to admit it, I felt ashamed at the choices that I had made, the trade-offs that I had made, putting my body, my life at risk, given the responsibilities that I had to my wife and my kids and my family and my friends and my business and you, right? And it reinforced something that I already knew, that this idea of work-life balance, it's BS. It doesn't exist. The only thing you can do is intentionally rebalance yourself. And when you go hard for a certain amount of time and you're burning the candle at both ends and you're exhausted, how do you deliberately and intentionally shove that pendulum back the other way towards relaxation and rejuvenation? And the thing is, I knew this was happening. I'd been going for 6 or 8 weeks with a travel schedule and family and friends and business and stress and obligations at every single turn. And yet I thought I could go just another week or 2 before relaxing and really focusing on anything that could be remotely close to self-care. And it was around this time a friend of mine recommended the book called 4,000 Weeks. And this was from a friend who did not know, because I didn't tell him exactly what I had gone through with my stroke. And the book 4,000 Weeks is by a gentleman named Oliver Burkeman. I would highly recommend it to a friend. And it refers to the number of weeks on Earth the average human lives, 4,000. So I did some quick back of the napkin math and found at 43 and a half years old, I was officially 56.5% done with my life if it were to be average. And at this point, coming off a TIA, it's pretty sure it was average at best. Within 50 pages, I was hit over the head by a 2x4 in the form of a paragraph that talked about the need to embrace limits. And Oliver Burkeman writes, in practical terms, a limit-embracing attitude to time means organizing your days with the understanding that you definitely won't have time for everything you want to do, or that other people want you to do. And so, at the very least, you can stop beating yourself up for failing. Since hard choices are unavoidable, what matters is learning to make them consciously, deciding what to focus on and what to neglect, rather than letting them get made by default. Or deceiving yourself that, with enough hard work and the right time management tricks, you might not have to make them at all. The point was, there's no such thing as time management. All it is making choices intentionally with where to invest your time and where to ignore everything else. And I had realized, while being really diligent in planning my weeks and staying focused on goals and key results, I was not aware of the trade-offs and choices I was making, and certainly not aware of the negative implications of doing that. I began to look at, for the previous 90 days, all the notes I had taken from all the meetings that I'd been in and all my calendars, digitally and physically, trying to look for the insights in retrospect that would lead me to the obvious conclusion that if I continued doing what I was doing, I was putting myself at risk. And the truth is, I couldn't. My calendar looked the same as it has for years. There was nothing that I could see in retrospect that would even lead me to guess that something bad could happen. And it was at that point I realized that my time management wasn't worth a damn. If I can't look to see that I'm piling more and more things on and learning from all the things I'm cramming in that could potentially kill me, what the hell was I doing it for in the first place? So I began researching other time management programs that would allow me to develop more insights about my time and where I was potentially cramming too much in. And that led me to a change in my time management system that I made based on a tool developed by Cal Newport, the guy who wrote Deep Work. Now, I'm not going to go into full detail. If you go to Bradley Hartman and Co., again, Bradley Hartman, 2 N's, and co.com, and you go to /tools, you can download this exact time management system that I'm using now. And it is, I would say, 100% more insightful than what I was using before. I'm not going to derail this entire conversation going to it now, but what I will tell you is that the key insight comes from monitoring your day. And every time you go from acknowledging that something is taking you off your pre-planned path, you are forced to say, okay, my plan for the day is disrupted. And then you make a new plan right next to it. So it's a 4-column system. Your original plan for the day is in column 1. When that gets blown up for whatever reason, good or bad, time goes off or time comes back on, you then go adjust. What am I going to do for the remainder of the day? When that blows up, you go to column number 3. And then if you need to, which I rarely do, you go to column number 4. Now, minor detail, why is this so impactful? This is a written record of how your day got blown up, and you can see the patterns. And I found I was stuffing way too many things in and feeling stressed, thinking I could do it all day after day after day without learning from the stupid mistakes I was doing, thinking I could get it all done. So that was the first change. And again, if you want to download it for free, go to our new website, bradleyhartmanandco.com /tools. You'll see the time management system in there. That was the first change. The second change we made immediately was applying something we talk about often, which is who, not how. We know this intuitively, but at least in our case, we hadn't been acting upon it enough. Who, not how says when you have a challenge, you have a frustration, or you have an opportunity, how is not the issue. You generally know how to take advantage of that or resolve it. The question is, who is your who? Who do you need to hire? Who do you need to bring in as a coach or as a consultant or a full-time hire, or in my case, an executive assistant, to help me better manage my time and alleviate stress. It is now a weekly mantra of mine to say who, not how. When we're stressed and we feel like all these things are weighing down on us, we need a new who. Who, not how. And this is a concept that comes from Dan Sullivan, founder of The Strategic Coach. And the principle is it's always other people. What you are struggling with, what you are challenged with, someone else is an expert at this and they can help you immediately. Your challenge isn't to fight through it, to throw more on your plate, to jam it in the week, to do more yourself. That's not the answer. It's to find a new who, find new talent, to delegate that to make your team better. And our third change, last but not least, but certainly relevant to this new and improved podcast that you are listening to called the Construction Leadership Podcast, is we chose to continue to scale without the complexity. I was forced to acknowledge that I was trying to grow our company in a really poor manner. What is that? Well, for decisions that at the time were accurate, but no longer are, we had been operating for the last 8 years, 2 companies. One was Red Angle, that specialized in bridging the language gap and improving cultural intelligence with the Hispanic demographic, because I speak fluent Spanish. And the other side of the business, that you probably know, is the Behind Your Back sales company, which is sales training, sales management consulting to help deliver more value between the buyers and sellers to reduce friction and make Build in America a little bit more enjoyable. That was based on my experience in a purchasing role for Pulte Homes. Those were 2 different companies. Because we separated them at the time, it made sense. So we had 2 websites. We had 2 emails. We had 2 podcasts. We had 2 business cards. We had 2 newsletters. I hate to admit this, it goes on. We literally duplicated everything. And while we have been successful growing each company, at every step of the way, the complexity increased. And the more we scaled, the more pressure built up. Now, when I read this out loud, I know what you're probably thinking. Not a huge insight here. Doesn't seem too hard. Seems pretty obvious. You should simplify. You're one person, you got one team, formalize one company. How hard is that? And my answer is, yeah, we were scared to change. Why? Because at least to our measurements of success, we've been successful and we've had a lot of fun growing the business. And we were afraid if we made a change, it could have a negative impact. So what did we do? We continued to muscle up and grind and scale through complexity. If you truly want to scale and you want to scale efficiently and quickly, you need to make sure your processes and your systems are simple. And 2 websites and 2 emails and 2 podcasts and 2 newsletters, that is not simple. Let me tell you, that is trying to scale through complexity, and it almost killed me. So my friend, here we are. This is why we have renamed this podcast the Construction Leadership Podcast. This is why we killed the other podcast and we've done the rebranding. And if you're looking at your phone and you see the new artwork, for better or worse, yeah, that's still my face, but you're going to see some new branding in there. And you are going to see in the upper right-hand corner is an ampersand. That means and. And in our company, it's Bradley Hartman and Company, right? Not super creative, I know. However, we're really stressing that because as we grow, A, it's not, and B, it can't be. To achieve the goals that we want to have, we really need the and. And yep, Bradley Hartman's a part of it. The and is what is going to help us grow. That is going to be what we stress as we build out our company, and we're doing that now. So I want to say thank you for listening. I know anytime there is a change, there's a risk, but I hope that these changes that we're making to the podcast, of the name and the artwork, and you will see in the future the length of different episodes. We're going to do some more shorter ones that are between 5 and 10 minutes, some ones that are between about 15 and 19 minutes, and we're still going to be doing the deeper dive conversations where we really peel back the onion and get below some of these surface level conversations that we have in our business and really get to know people and think deeply about how we do things differently and how we do them better. So all of this effort is to help us continue to scale without the complexity. So as always, Thank you for listening. Keep in mind, please, what the doctor told me. Take care of yourself. Literally, there's only one vessel per soul. Only one vessel per soul. You only get one body. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real thing. Seemingly obvious, yet obviously I was acting as if otherwise. So we're going to close out like we always do with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.